It started with a truck. Not some eyesore rusting away in a yard, not some abandoned vehicle. Just my pride and joy, polished and gleaming, parked in my own driveway. But to Karen, the self-appointed queen of our neighborhood's HOA, it was an opportunity. She wanted it, not for herself, but for her son. And when I refused, she decided to make my life a living hell. Harassment, fines, threats, even calling the police. She pulled every trick in the book. But what she didn't know was that I had something powerful on my side. The state attorney. And when the truth finally came out, it would not just end her campaign against me, but bring down her entire empire. How far would she go to take what wasn't hers? And how far would I go to fight back? When I first moved into the neighborhood, I was excited. It was one of those places that looked like the perfect picture of suburban living, manicured lawns, kids playing on the sidewalks, neighbors smiling as they walked their dogs. The kind of place where you could finally exhale and feel like you'd made it. I had worked hard to buy my home. Years of saving, years of long hours, years of telling myself it would all be worth it. When I finally had a place that was mine, and when I signed those papers and carried the first box through the door, it really did feel like a dream. The house itself wasn't anything extravagant, but it was solid, comfortable, and exactly what I wanted. And in the driveway sat my truck. That truck wasn't just a vehicle, it was a symbol of everything I had worked for. I had bought it new, cared for it meticulously, and I wasn't ashamed to admit I was proud of it. Every Saturday morning, I'd be out there washing it, making sure it looked as good as the day I drove it off the lot. At first, life in the neighborhood seemed fine. People waved, a couple of folks came by to introduce themselves. The HOA board sent me the usual welcome packet, full of rules about lawn care, trash bins, and paint colors. It seemed strict but manageable. I wasn't planning on breaking any rules. I just wanted to live in peace. But then came Karen. She was one of those people you notice immediately. Always outside, always watching, always carrying a clipboard or a phone. She had this way of making you feel like you were being judged every time you walked past her house. At first, I thought maybe she was just involved. Some people take pride in their community, right? But it didn't take long before I realized this was something different. The first interaction we had was about my truck. She stopped me one afternoon while I was polishing it and made a comment that seemed harmless at first. "Nice truck," she said. "My son's been wanting one just like it." I smiled, thanked her, and went back to work. But then she added, "If you ever think about selling it, let me know." I told her politely that I wasn't planning to sell. She pressed a little, asking how much I paid, if I was making payments, if I really needed something that big. I laughed it off, but the way she looked at me, sharp, calculating, made me uneasy. Over the next few weeks, the comments continued. She'd mention her son again, how much he'd love a truck like mine, how perfect it would be for him. Each time, I brushed it off. I wasn't interested in selling, and I didn't think I needed to explain myself. But Karen didn't like hearing no, and soon, her tone shifted from casual comments to something more pointed. "You know," she said one day, "trucks like that don't really fit in with the character of this neighborhood. The HOA has rules about vehicles and driveways." That was the first time I felt the chill. The first time I realized this wasn't just about a truck. It was about control. And Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was the head of the HOA. At first, the notices were subtle. A letter in my mailbox reminding me of the rules regarding vehicle storage. Then a warning about non-compliant vehicles parked in driveways. The language was vague, but the message was clear: my truck was suddenly a problem. I checked the bylaws. There was nothing against owning a truck, nothing against parking it in your own driveway. The only restrictions applied to commercial vehicles or trailers. Mine was neither. I thought maybe it was just a misunderstanding. I even emailed the HOA politely, pointing this out. The response: silence. Then came the fines, the $50 for the first violation, the $100 for the next, $150 after that. Each notice made less sense than the last, citing aesthetic violations and community harmony. It was obvious what was happening. Karen was manufacturing reasons to target me. I tried talking to her directly. I knocked on her door, asked if we could resolve this like adults. She didn't even let me finish before snapping. "Rules are rules. If you don't like it, maybe this isn't the neighborhood for you." That was the moment I knew this wasn't about rules. This was about power, and Karen wasn't stopping there. One afternoon, I came home to find 2 police officers at my door. Karen had called them, claiming my truck was an abandoned commercial vehicle. The officers were polite but clearly annoyed. Once they saw my registration, insurance, and the fact that it was sitting in my own driveway, they apologized and left. But the damage was done. She had escalated to harassment. The neighbors noticed, too. Some avoided me, afraid of drawing Karen's attention. Others whispered their support, admitting they'd been targeted in the past for things as petty as leaving holiday decorations up too long or having the wrong kind of flowers in their yard. It wasn't just me anymore. Karen had built an empire of fear, and my truck was simply her latest excuse to wield it. I documented everything, every fine, every letter, every interaction. I took photos, saved emails, and even recorded video of my perfectly compliant truck sitting quietly in my driveway. The thicker the file got, the angrier I became, but then came the breaking point. One evening, after another long day, I found a new notice taped to my door. This one wasn't a fine. It was a threat. If I didn't remove the truck within 30 days, the HOA would begin proceedings to place a lie-in on my property. They weren't just trying to take my truck anymore. They were trying to take my home. And that's when I decided enough was enough. The next OA board meeting was packed. Word had spread about the notices, the fines, the lie-in threat. Neighbors filled the room, some curious, others anxious, a few openly angry. Karen sat at the head of the table, smug as ever, tapping her pen against her clipboard. When my case came up on the agenda, she launched into her performance. She spoke about neighborhood standards, about vehicles that degrade property values, about members who refuse to comply. She painted me as a reckless troublemaker, someone endangering the harmony of the community. But then it was my turn. The next OA board meeting was packed. Word had spread about the notices, the fines, the lie-in threat. Neighbors filled the room, some curious, others anxious, a few openly angry. Karen sat at the head of the table, smug as ever, tapping her pen against her clipboard. When my case came up on the agenda, she launched into her performance. She spoke about neighborhood standards, about vehicles that degrade property values, about members who refuse to comply. She painted me as a reckless troublemaker, someone endangering the harmony of the community. But then it was my turn. Walking out of that meeting, binder in hand, I felt a weight lift. The neighbors weren't whispering about me anymore. They were whispering about her. Karen, the untouchable, the feared, had finally been exposed. Within days, my attorney sent a cease and desist letter to the board. They were ordered to drop all fines, halt any lien attempts, and acknowledge in writing that my truck was fully compliant. And if they didn't, we'd pursue damages. With the state attorney's backing, neighbors began to talk openly. Stories poured out about the years of harassment, the bogus fines, the intimidation tactics. People who had once stayed silent now found their voices. The OA's power, once absolute, began to collapse. Karen tried to hold on, of course. She muttered about conspiracies, about being the real victim. But her grip was gone. At a special meeting called by the residents, the vote was nearly unanimous. Karen was out. She left in disgrace, carrying a box of papers, her former allies avoiding her gaze. The HOA itself was forced to reform. An audit uncovered mismanaged funds and shady practices. Restitution was paid. Rules were rewritten. Oversight committees were formed. For the first time, the HOA actually served the community instead of controlling it. And me. My truck still sits in my driveway, shining in the sun, a daily reminder that I refuse to bow down. What started as one woman's obsession ended with a neighborhood finally free from her grip. Looking back, I realized something important. Bullies only win when people stay silent. Karen never had real power. She had fear. And once that fear was gone, so was she. So here's my takeaway: sometimes you don't choose the battle. Sometimes it's forced on you. But when it is, don't back down. Don't give in. Stand your ground, because you never know how many people are waiting for someone, anyone, to show them it's possible to fight back. And in the end, that fight might not just save your home. It might save the whole neighborhood.